Hey, how are you, folks? Jason Horowitz with you on Who's Hot, Who's Not, part of the CBSSports.com Fantasy Football Series. And, of course, the biggest story and most important this week in the NFL, the passing early Tuesday morning of Redskins safety Sean Taylor from a gunshot suffered early Monday morning. Obviously, that putting the games on a totally different level. That, of course, includes fantasy. But this is fantasy football, and by definition, that is an escape from reality, and that's what we'll try and do here as we get you ready for Week 13 in your fantasy leagues, and for most of you, the last week before the fantasy postseason begins. And so to do that, we bring in CBSSports.com senior fantasy writer Jamie Eisenberg from Miami. And Jamie, as we move forward here, I got to ask you this because I've asked you week in, week out. Are you finally on my Devin Hester bandwagon?
Unless, again, you're talking about special teams. Come on, Jason. What they need to do is line him up about 20 yards back and hand him the ball like a running back, almost like he's fielding a punt, and try to run some offense that way because, with no Cedric Benson now, he may be a good running back as opposed to the other Adrian Peterson.
I'll tell you what, though, Jamie. Devin Hester would get you more points week in, week out than a lot of guys say maybe, Sean Alexander even before he got hurt. Just putting that out there.
Your favorite guy, Sean Alexander.
Favorite guy to rip on this year. All right, Jamie, week 12, it was certainly one in which a lot of studs came back into play that people have been waiting for week in and week out to help them out. And that's, Frank Gore, certainly one of those. Over 200 total yards from scrimmage. That after totaling more than 100 just twice this season. Is he hot for the playoffs or a one-week fling that he had with Trent Dilfer?
Well, I don't know if it's a one-week fling, and I don't know if he's hot through the playoffs, but I think in this week you definitely play him because facing Carolina, he has a chance to sort of, repeat that performance. I don't know if he's going to get you that many yards and certainly score again, but this is what we were used to seeing from Frank Gore last year, maybe starting to get healthy. I know he was in and out of a couple series with an ankle injury, but, I think maybe this offense is going to start to, make some moves now. Again, they have some stability at the quarterback spot. We saw some stuff from Vernon Davis, from Arnez Battle, so they are establishing a couple of weapons. So, again, I think you see what Frank Gore is able to do this week against the Panthers, and hopefully it's a sign of things to come.
Again, you never sit Frank Gore when he's healthy, but maybe not expect as much because, let's be honest, this is the worst offense until this past week in the NFL. What about Deion Branch, Chad Johnson? Both people have been waiting for, had huge breakout weeks. Again, one-week thing or ready to go for the playoffs?
Well, Jason, you can't see it, but Chad Johnson's actually behind the camera right now filming me at this point. But, Chad Johnson, I guess, it's just a product of the offense. T.J. Houshmandzadeh has been so good this season. Chris Henry has come on with the suspension, or coming back from the suspension, has started to play well. So I think it's almost pick your poison with defensive coordinators, and Chad Johnson finally had his week. Again, not a guy you're going to sit on most weeks. We get a lot of emails from fantasy owners saying, I have this guy and this guy, should I sit Chad Johnson? Well, this is what you're going to get sometimes if you do sit him and see this type of performance. And then with Deion Branch, now with DJ Hackett dealing with an ankle injury again, and he's finally healthy, and the way that the Seahawks offense is going to click because of your boy Sean Alexander not playing well, you're going to start to see Deion Branch again become that number one guy as he was early on this season.
Yeah, I got to love it how he's become my boy all of a sudden, all season long.
You released him. You released him in a fantasy league, so yes, we have to consider him your favorite player.
And it turned out to be a fantastic move. Let's get to a couple of quarterbacks who had hot week 12s, and for the most part, they're not really recommended as your top option, but if you've got an injury or something along those lines, Phillip Rivers, Jay Cutler. Maybe a couple guys hot for a couple weeks.
Well, I think with Phillip Rivers, the biggest thing with him is you got to get the ball to Antonio Gates. I mean, he's your best player in terms of the passing game. They're going to give LaDainian Tomlinson plenty of carries. You have Chris Chambers now, and hopefully he's getting used to the offense and has finally acclimated himself to that team. And so their opportunity for Phillip Rivers to succeed is there. So you like to see it hopefully continue, and North Turner continue to allow Phillip Rivers to have some success. With Jay Cutler, he's only got better as the season's gone on. Brandon Marshall's playing great. Now he has Javon Walker healthy, so this could be a guy that could help you, if he's available on waivers because some people gave up on him or he's been your backup. Could be a starter going into the playoffs when the matchup is right.
And he's got a tight end to go to as well, and Tony Scheffler. And on top of it, this week he's got Oakland, which is always a good matchup for quarterbacks. On the other side, you mentioned Phillip Rivers. He was in the same draft as Eli Manning, and of course, he hasn't taken nearly the scrutiny that the Giants quarterback has, but of course, Rivers not in New York, where Eli wanted to be. At this point, it's not like Manning necessarily has the most fantasy value anyway, but does he have any fantasy value for people who want to be in the postseason?
Well, I think you got to look at him as, as Plaxico Burress continues to deal with his ankle situation, and Jeremy Shockey's had up and down performances this season. The biggest thing for him, I think, is when the running game is there and he doesn't have to have the pressure to win a game. Minnesota's run defense is so good. He was really asked to sort of carry this team, and we saw what happened. 4 interceptions, a really bad sack where he ran about 40 yards backwards and fell down. So when Eli's put in that position, he's not really going to continue to have some success for you as a fantasy owner, and not someone you want to count on a week-to-week basis. But if you're in leagues where interceptions don't count against you. He's probably going to throw at least 1, maybe 2 touchdowns a week, just because that's the way the offense, is sort of, designed. And I think you'll see, this week against Chicago, he's always had good history bouncing back from bad games. So if he bounces back again, maybe it's someone to use.
We'll have to see how that works. But again, they also have the history against him last year of the second half swoon. We'll see if that happens this year as well. Jamie, Pittsburgh Steelers certainly were not a hot team this past Monday night. Of course, that because of the weather. We'll talk about that on Move Makers and debate that about whether we think that'll actually continue as we go forward. Jamie, we'll see you then.
Thanks a lot. And again, unfortunate news with Sean Taylor, and our prayers out to his family and the Redskins.
Yeah, certainly the case this week for all people involved in the NFL. All right, Jamie, we'll talk to you real soon.
You got it.
Folks, that's it for this edition of Who's Hot and Who's Not, part of the CBSSports.com Fantasy Football Series. But for more, be sure to continue navigating the website. Watch everything else all over the CBS Audience Network. For Jamie Eisberg, I'm Jason Horowitz. Take care.